3 years ago, Gavin Reynolds threw a divorce settlement across a mahogany table and told his wife Sarah that she was nothing but dead weight holding back his potential. He laughed when she cried. He toasted with champagne when she left the building with nothing but a suitcase and a used sedan. He thought he had won. He thought he was the shark in the water. But today, Gavin is sitting in a boardroom on the 42nd floor of the World Trade Center, sweating through a $3,000 suit. He's there to sign the biggest merger in tech history, a $4.2 billion buyout. But when the portfolio binder is finally opened and the identity of the majority shareholder of the buying firm is revealed, Gavin stops breathing. The name on the contract isn't a Wall Street titan. It's the woman he mocked, discarded, and underestimated. And she didn't come to buy his company. She came to bury it. The end of the marriage didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a transaction. Gavin Reynolds liked to think of himself as a visionary. He was the CEO of LogoStream, a mid-sized logistics software company based in Seattle that was finally, after 5 years of stagnation, starting to see green arrows on the NASDAQ. Gavin was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, tall, perfectly groomed dark hair, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was the kind of man who checked his reflection in storefront windows while you were talking to him. His wife, Sra, was the ghost in the machine. Sarah was quiet. She wore oversized cardigans and glasses that slid down her nose. While Gavin was the face of LogoStream, spending his nights at mixers at the Space Needle or flying business class to San Francisco. Sarah was at home, or so people thought. In reality, Sarah was usually in the den rewriting Gavin's code. Gavin wasn't a bad coder, but he was sloppy. He was a big picture guy. Sarah was the one who found the memory leaks. Sarah was the one who optimized the server architecture so the system didn't crash during the Black Friday rush. But whenever Gavin did an interview with TechCrunch or Wired, he never mentioned Sarah. He talked about his sleepless nights and his singular vision. Sarah never complained. She loved him. She believed in the partnership. Until the dinner at Canlis. It was their 10th anniversary. Gavin had rented the private room overlooking Lake Union. He had invited 3 other couples, his CFO, his VP of sales, and a potential investor named Arthur Sterling. It wasn't an anniversary dinner. It was a pitch meeting disguised as a celebration. Sarah sat silently while the men talked over her. She was wearing a simple blue dress she'd had for years. "The key to Logos," Gavin said, swirling his Pinot Noir, "is that I cut the fat. Efficient code, efficient staff, efficient life." Arthur Sterling, a heavy-set man with eyes like flint, looked at Sarah. "And your wife, does she contribute to the efficiency?" Gavin laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound. "Sarah. Oh, Sarah is the anchor, and I don't mean that in the nautical stabilizing sense. I mean she keeps the ship from moving forward." The table went silent. The VP of sales looked down at his plate. "Honey, I'm joking," Gavin said, patting her hand condescendingly. "But really, Sarah is a traditionalist. She doesn't get the hustle. She's happy with small things. I'm trying to build an empire, and I come home to someone who wants to talk about, I don't know, gardening." Sarah pulled her hand away. "I wrote the patch for the API integration last week, Gavin. The one that saved the Amazon account." Gavin's face hardened. His eyes flashed with genuine anger. He hated being contradicted, especially in front of money. "You fixed a typo, Sarah. Don't pretend you're an engineer. You're a support system. And barely that." He turned back to Arthur Sterling. "See what I deal with. It's hard to soar when you have dead weight tied to your ankles." That night, the drive home was silent. When they got to their sleek modern house in Queen Anne, Gavin didn't go inside. He stayed in the driveway. "I want a divorce," he said. He didn't even look at her. "Gavin, you're drunk," Sarah whispered, her hand on the door handle. "I'm not drunk, I'm lucid. My stock is up 40% this quarter. I'm being scouted by private equity in New York. I'm going places, Sarah. And look at you." He gestured vaguely at her silhouette. "You don't fit the brand anymore. You're small town. I need global." The divorce proceedings were brutal. Gavin hired a shark from the firm Latham & Watkins. He hid assets. He claimed that Sarah's contributions to the code were clerical work and non-technical. Because Sarah had never officially been on the payroll, she just helped him because she was his wife. She had no paper trail. Gavin's lawyer, a man named Bennett, sat across from Sarah in a glass-walled conference room. "Mr. Reynolds is prepared to offer you the house in Tacoma and a lump sum of $50,000, Bennett said. "In exchange, you sign an NDA regarding company trade secrets and waive all rights to future earnings of Logo Stream." "I wrote the core algorithm," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I wrote the load balancer." "Can you prove it?" Bennett asked, smiling thinly. "Because the commit logs are under Gavin's admin account. As far as the court is concerned, you're a housewife who is trying to extort a successful CEO. Sarah looked at Gavin. He was checking his watch, looking bored. She realized then that he didn't just fall out of love with her. He despised her. He despised her because she knew the truth that he wasn't a genius. He was a fraud who stood on her shoulders. Sarah picked up the pen. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She signed the papers. "Good choice," Gavin smirked, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "Buy yourself something nice, or pay off your student loans. Whatever people like you do." He walked out. He didn't look back. Sarah sat alone in the conference room. She looked at the signature on the paper. Sarah Jenkins. She had already dropped his last name. She wasn't crying anymore. The sadness had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Gavin thought she was dead weight. He thought she was a clerical worker. He had forgotten one thing. She knew where the bodies were buried in his code, and she knew exactly how to build a shovel. 2 years passed. Gavin Reynolds was living the dream, or at least the Instagram version of it. After the divorce, Logo Stream had been acquired by a larger conglomerate, but Gavin had stayed on as the CEO of the division. He had moved to New York City, buying a penthouse in Tribeca with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Hudson River. He was a regular in the Page 6 gossip columns. Tech CEO Gavin Reynolds spotted at the Pierre with model influential. Gavin Reynolds closes down marquee for private birthday bash. He dated a string of women who looked exactly the way he wanted them to look, tall, silent, and expensive. He bought a Ferrari he couldn't drive properly. He started using words like synergy and paradigm shift in casual conversation. But beneath the surface, Logos Stream was bleeding. Without Sarah to patch the code, the software was becoming buggy. Clients were complaining about lag times. The efficiency Gavin bragged about was eroding. He fired his CTO and hired a cheaper team from overseas, but the problems persisted. Gavin didn't care. He was focused on the next big thing, the exit. He wanted to sell the company entirely, wash his hands of it, and walk away with $1 billion. He needed a buyer who was rich enough to pay a premium, but distant enough not to look too closely at the messy code. Then the rumor started circulating. It began at a charity gala at the Met. Gavin was holding a martini wearing a tuxedo that cost more than Sarah's old car. He was talking to Silas Vane, a venture capitalist with ears in every boardroom in Manhattan. "Have you heard about Obsidian?" Silas asked, lowering his voice. Gavin raised an eyebrow. "The gemstone? No." "Obsidian Holdings," Silas said. "It's a ghost fund, based out of Zurich, maybe Singapore. Nobody really knows. They popped up about 18 months ago. They've been aggressively acquiring logistics and data firms. They don't buy small. They buy the whole board." "I haven't heard of them," Gavin said, feigning disinterest while mentally taking notes. "Nobody meets the chairman," Silas continued. "They send proxies, lawyers, scary types, but they pay cash, and they pay 20% above market value if the tech is right." Gavin's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. This was the escape hatch. The next morning, Gavin ordered his team to prepare a prospectus. He reached out to his contacts. He put the feelers out. Logo's Stream was for sale. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at his office. It was thick, heavy cream cardstock. No return address. Just a logo embossed in black, a jagged piece of volcanic glass. Obsidian Holdings. The letter was brief. "Mr. Reynolds, we have been monitoring your market position. We are interested in discussing a total acquisition of Logo Stream. Initial valuation assessment, $4.2 billion. A representative will call you." Gavin stared at the number. 4.2 billion. He let out a whoop of joy that startled his secretary outside. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city. He was a god. He had done it. He thought about Sarah for the first time in months. "Dead weight," he chuckled to himself, sipping his espresso. "If she had stuck around, she'd be entitled to half of this. Poor girl is probably working at a Starbucks in Tacoma right now." He pulled out his phone. He still had her number, though he had blocked it. He unblocked it just for a second. He didn't call. Instead, he sent a text. It was petty. It was childish, but he couldn't resist. "Hope you're doing well. Just wanted to let you know I'm about to close a deal that will make history. Shame you didn't have the vision to stick it out. Take care." He hit send, then immediately blocked her again. He felt a rush of superiority. A week later, the first meeting with Obsidian was scheduled. It was to be held at a neutral location, a high-end law firm in Midtown, Cravath Swain and more. Gavin walked in with his entourage, his lawyer Bennett, his new CFO, and his ego. The conference room was massive. On the other side of the table sat 3 people, 2 men in grey suits who looked like they were carved out of granite, and a woman. The woman was striking. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, with steel grey hair cut in a sharp bob. She wore a suit that cost more than Gavin's car. She didn't smile. "Mr. Reynolds," the woman said. Her accent was European indiscernible. "I am Petra. I represent the board of Obsidian." "Pleasure," Gavin said, flashing his winning smile. He reached out to shake her hand. She didn't take it. She just gestured to the seat. "We don't need pleasantries," Petra said. "We have analyzed your public financials. They are adequate, but Obsidian does not buy financials. We buy architecture. We buy the code." "The code is state-of-the-art," Gavin lied smoothly. "Proprietary algorithms, unmatched latency." "We shall see," Petra said. "Our technical diligence team will be arriving tomorrow. They will need full access to your repositories. Root access. No black boxes." Gavin hesitated. Root access meant they would see the patches. They would see the messy code he had been hiding. They would see that the foundation was crumbling. "Is that necessary?" Gavin asked. Usually we provide a high-level overview. Petra's eyes bored into him. Mr. Reynolds, for $4.2 billion, we are not buying a high-level overview. We are buying the engine. If you refuse, we walk away right now. Gavin swallowed. He couldn't lose this deal. Of course. Access will be granted. Good, Petra said. She closed her folder. One more thing. The chairman of Obsidian is personally interested in this acquisition. He or she has requested that the final signing, should we proceed, be done in person, with the chairman. I'd be honored, Gavin said. Who is the chairman? Petra smiled for the first time. It wasn't a nice smile. You will meet the chairman when the ink is ready to dry. Until then, you deal with me. As Gavin left the meeting, he felt a strange unease. Obsidian felt different. They weren't like the other VC firms. They were colder, sharper. He brushed it off. He was Gavin Reynolds. He could charm anyone. He could fake his way through the technical audit. He had done it before. But as he walked out onto 8th Avenue, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Sarah Jenkins viewed your profile. He laughed. She got the text, he muttered. She's checking up on me, eating her heart out. He didn't know that Sarah wasn't eating her heart out. 3,000 miles away in a dimly lit office in Zurich, Sarah Jenkins sat in front of a bank of monitors. She wasn't wearing a cardigan. She was wearing a silk blouse and a headset. On her screen was the live feed from the security cameras in the Cravath conference room in New York. She had watched the whole meeting. She zoomed in on Gavin's face, the sweat on his brow, the nervous twitch in his eye when Petra mentioned root access. Sarah leaned back in her chair. She swiveled to the next monitor. It displayed the source code for Logos Stream, but next to it, it displayed a new code, a massive, intricate Sornoda web of algorithms she had spent the last 2 years building under the name Obsidian. He has no idea, she whispered. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Petra, she said into the phone. He took the bait. Begin the audit. And Petra, yes, Madame Chairman, make him bleed. The technical audit team from Obsidian didn't look like auditors. They looked like hackers who had just been released from a black site prison. There were 5 of them, led by a man named Simon Cross. Cross was British rail-thin, wearing a hoodie under a blazer, and he had a reputation in Silicon Valley. He was the guy you called when you wanted to know if a startup was actually using AI or just running a bunch of if-then statements in a basement. Gavin met them in the server room of Logos Stream's New York satellite office. He was flanked by his new CTO, a man named Rajiv, who Gavin had hired solely because he was cheap and said yes to everything. Gentlemen, Gavin said, extending a hand. Welcome to the Nerve Center. As you'll see, our architecture is robust. We're running a customized Kubernetes cluster on AWS, auto-scaling fully redundant. Simon Cross didn't shake Gavin's hand. He plugged a laptop into the main terminal. We'll see, Cross said. My team is going to run a stress test. We're going to simulate a 500% traffic spike, same volume as Amazon Prime Day. If your system holds, we sign off. If it crashes, we recommend Obsidian pull the deal. Gavin felt a bead of sweat roll down his back. 500%. That's extreme. We aren't a retail platform. You claimed your software is infinitely scalable in your Q3 report. Cross replied without looking up. Was that a lie, Mr. Reynolds? No. Gavin snapped. Run the test. Gavin pulled Rajiv into the hallway. Is it going to hold? He hissed, grabbing the CTO by the arm. Rajiv looked terrified. Mr. Reynolds, the legacy code. The code your wife wrote. It was the load-bearing wall. We patched over it, but we never truly understood it. If they push it that hard, the patch might break. If it breaks, you're fired, Gavin whispered. Fix it. Use mirrors. Use cached data. I don't care. Just make the dashboard look green. For the next 4 hours, Gavin sat in his glass office watching the Obsidian team work. They were silent, typing furiously. On the big screen, the server load graphs were climbing. 50%, 120%, 300%. The lights in the server room actually flickered. Suddenly, Cross stopped typing. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. He spoke quietly, then hung up. He walked into Gavin's office. We found something, Cross said. A bug, Gavin asked, trying to sound casual. Every system has bugs. Not a bug, a ghost, Cross said. He turned his laptop around. On the screen was a block of code. It was complex, elegant, and completely different from the messy spaghetti code surrounding it. This core kernel, Cross said, pointing to the screen. It handles your entire database encryption. It's brilliant. Who wrote this? Gavin squinted. He recognized the syntax. It was Sarah's. She had written it 3 years ago during a weekend marathon session when the company was about to go under. She had named the variable classes after flowers, rose, lily, orchid, hidden deep in the logic where no one would look. I did, Gavin lied. It's my proprietary encryption method. Cross stared at him. You wrote this. Yes, is there a problem? The problem, Mr. Reynolds, is that this code has a dead man's switch embedded in it. It's designed to degrade if it's not maintained by the original author's private key. It's been degrading for 2 years. That's why your latency is up. That's why your clients are leaving. Cross leaned in. You didn't write this, because if you did, you would know that in 48 hours, this encryption key expires, and when it does, Logo Stream doesn't just slow down. It deletes itself. Gavin's blood ran cold. He had no idea. Sarah hadn't told him. Or maybe she had, and he hadn't listened. Can you fix it? Gavin asked, his voice trembling. Me no, Cross laughed. This is custom cryptography. Only the original author has the seed key. If you can't find the person who wrote this, your company is worth $0. Cross slammed his laptop shut. I'm calling Petra. We're putting a hold on the acquisition. Wait, Gavin shouted, jumping up. Don't call her. Give me 24 hours. I can get the key. I have it in a safe deposit box. I just need to retrieve it. Cross looked at his watch. 24 hours, Reynolds. If you don't have that key by noon tomorrow, Obsidian walks, and we will short sell your stock on the way out. The team left. Gavin was alone in his office. The silence was deafening. He realized with horror that he couldn't just fake this. He needed Sarah. He needed the woman he had discarded. He grabbed his phone. He unblocked her number again. He dialed. It went straight to voicemail. Hi, this is Sarah. I'm busy living my life. Leave a message. Gavin slammed the phone onto his desk, cracking the screen. He was the master of the universe, the CEO of $1 billion prospect, and his entire fate rested in the hands of a woman who was probably knitting in a duplex in Tacoma. Or so he thought. While Gavin was hyperventilating in New York, Sarah was in a private jet, cruising at 40,000 feet over the Atlantic. She was watching the video feed from Gavin's office on her tablet. She saw him throw the phone. She saw him crumble into his chair, head in his hands. He's panicking, Petra said, sitting across from her, sipping sparkling water. Cross did a good job spooking him. He's not spooked enough, Sarah said calmly. He still thinks he can manipulate his way out of it. He thinks he can bully me into giving him the key. Sarah closed the tablet. She looked different than she did 3 years ago. The soft edges were gone. She wore tailored Italian suits. Her glasses were designer frames. She had taken the $50,000 Gavin gave her the pity money and invested it in cryptocurrency options right before the boom. She turned $50,000 into $2 million. Then she used that to fund a startup that specialized in hostile takeover defense algorithms. She didn't just get rich, she got powerful. She built Obsidian specifically to hunt predators like Gavin. "What is the next move, Madam Chairman?" Petra asked. "He's going to try to find me," Sarah said. "He'll hire a private investigator. He'll try to find Sarah Jenkins in Tacoma. Let him look. He won't find her." "And the deal?" "We proceed," Sarah said. "But the price changes." Back in New York, Gavin was in crisis mode. He had hired a private investigator named Lenny Russo, an ex-NYPD detective who charged $500 an hour. "Find her," Gavin barked, pacing around his penthouse. "Sarah Jenkins, Tacoma, Washington. She drives a Honda Civic. She likes gardening." "How hard can it be?" Russo called back 4 hours later. "Mr. Reynolds, I got bad news," Russo said. "Sarah Jenkins doesn't exist anymore." "What do you mean? Did she die?" Gavin felt a flicker of hope. If she was dead, maybe he could claim the copyright passed to him as her former spouse. "No, she vanished," Russo said. "Sold the house in Tacoma 2 years ago. Closed her bank accounts. Social security number hasn't been used. No credit card hits. It's like she fell off the face of the earth." Gavin felt the walls closing in. He had 20 hours left before the cross deadline. Then his phone rang. It wasn't Russo. It was Petra. "Mr. Reynolds." Petra's voice was ice cold. "Cross tells me there is an anomaly in the code. A missing key. It's under control." Gavin lied, his voice cracking. "Just a minor administrative error. I'm retrieving the backup." "We are not comfortable with this risk," Petra said. "However, the chairman is still interested in the acquisition. But the terms have changed." "Changed how?" "The valuation is no longer $4.2 billion, Petra said. "We are dropping the offer to $2.5 billion. "That's nearly half," Gavin screamed. "That's robbery." "Take it or leave it," Petra said. "And one more condition. The chairman requires that you personally indemnify the deal. That means if the code fails after we buy it, Obsidian can seize your personal assets, your houses, your accounts, your stock options. Everything." Gavin stopped breathing. This was a death trap. If he signed this and he couldn't fix the code, he would be destitute. He would be worse off than Sarah was when he kicked her out. But if he didn't sign, the deal collapsed. The Cross report would leak. Logos stream stock would crash. He would be fired by his own board and investigated by the SEC for fraud. He had no choice. I accept," Gavin whispered. "Excellent," Petra said. "The signing ceremony is in 3 days, in Zurich. The chairman looks forward to meeting you." Gavin hung up. He sank to the floor of his penthouse. He had saved the deal, but he had put his head in a guillotine. He needed that key. He had 3 days to find Sarah. He stood up, a manic look in his eyes. He went to his safe and pulled out an old box of photos he hadn't thrown away. He found a picture of Sarah from their honeymoon in Hawaii. She was smiling, looking at him with adoration. "Where are you?" he muttered at the photo. "Where are you hiding, you little mouse?" He flipped the photo over. On the back in Sarah's handwriting was a note. To my genius husband. Together we can build anything. And below that, a date. And a location. But then he noticed something else. Tucked in the corner of the box was an old USB drive, a silver one. He remembered Sarah used to wear it on a necklace sometimes. She called it her lucky charm. He must have swept it into the box when he was clearing out her stuff. His heart stopped. Could it be? He jammed the USB drive into his laptop. A folder popped up. It was password protected. The hint read, "What did you call me on our 10th anniversary?" Gavin stared at the screen. The memory of that night at Canlis came flooding back. The wine, the laughter, Arthur Sterling's face. Dead weight. He typed it in. DEADWEIGHT. Access denied. He tried again. Dead weight. Access denied. He tried the anchor. Useless. Housewife. Access denied. Access denied. Access denied. A message popped up on the screen. 3 attempts failed. Drive formatting in 10 seconds. No, 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 Gavin screamed, clawing at the keyboard. The progress bar filled up. Deleting. Deleting. Complete. The drive was empty. Gavin stared at the blank screen. He realized then that the USB drive wasn't the key. It was a trap. A fail-safe she must have left behind, knowing he would only find it if he was desperate. It was a final middle finger from the past. He was going to Zurich empty-handed. He was going to sign away his life to a mystery chairman, hoping he could charm them into mercy. He packed his bag. He took his best suit. He looked in the mirror. He looked tired, older. "I'm Gavin Reynolds," he told his reflection. "I always win." But for the first time in his life, he didn't believe it. Zurich in late autumn was a city of steel and grey skies, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of New York. Gavin Reynolds sat in the back of a black Mercedes Maybach that Obsidian had sent to collect him from the airport. The interior smelled of expensive leather and silence. He stared out the window as they crossed the Quaibrücke Bridge. The lake was a sheet of dark glass. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked tired. The stress of the last 72 hours had etched lines around his eyes that no amount of moisturizer could hide. He had signed the preliminary papers. He had agreed to the personal indemnification clause. He had bet his entire life, his fortune, his reputation, his future on the gamble that he could charm the chairman of Obsidian. He had to convince this stranger that the missing encryption key was a minor oversight, not a fatal flaw. The car pulled up to a building that looked less like an office and more like a modern fortress. It was a monolith of black glass and concrete jutting out of the hillside. No signage, just the jagged volcanic glass logo etched into the stone wall. Gavin was escorted by 2 security guards who looked like they were ex-military. They didn't speak. They led him into an elevator that moved so smoothly he couldn't tell if they were going up or down. The doors opened onto the top floor. It was an open-concept space, minimalist, and terrifyingly sterile. One wall was entirely glass overlooking the Alps in the distance. In the center of the room was a long table made of a single slab of petrified wood. Petra was there. So were the lawyers, grim-faced men in dark suits, and Simon Cross, the auditor, who was smirking as he typed on his tablet. "Mr. Reynolds," Petra said, not rising from her seat, "you are punctual." "I respect the chairman's time," Gavin said, smoothing his tie. He tried to project confidence, but his voice sounded thin in the cavernous room. Is he joining us? She, Petra corrected. And yes, she is ready. Petra pressed a button on the table. A set of heavy double doors at the far end of the room clicked open. Gavin stood up, buttoning his jacket. He put on his best visionary CEO smile, the one that had charmed investors, seduced women, and graced the cover of magazines. He prepared to meet a European heiress, or perhaps a reclusive tech matriarch. A figure walked through the doors. She was wearing a white power suit, tailored to perfection, that made her look like a blade of light against the dark room. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the polished concrete floor. Click, click, click. Gavin squinted. The silhouette was familiar. The walk was familiar, though the posture was different. The woman approaching him didn't walk with a slouch. She walked with the predatory grace of a panther. She stepped into the light. Gavin's smile froze. His breath hitched in his throat. His brain refused to process the visual data. It was Sarah. But it wasn't the Sarah he knew. It wasn't the woman in the oversized cardigan who made him tea and apologized for taking up space. This woman had hair cut in a sharp, chic bob. Her skin was luminous, and behind her designer glasses, her eyes were cold hard and utterly devoid of fear. "Hello, Gavin," she said. Her voice was smooth, deep, and commanded the room. Gavin staggered back a step, his legs hitting the chair. "Sarah, what are you doing here? I work here," she said, simply walking to the head of the table. She didn't look at him. She looked at Petra. "Are the documents prepared?" "Yes, Madam Chairman," Petra said. Gavin's head spun. "Madam Chairman." "No." Gavin laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "No, this is a joke. Is this a prank? Did you hire these actors?" He looked around at the lawyers. "Very funny, Sarah. You got me. You rented an office to scare me." Sarah finally looked at him. The look was withering. It was the look one might give to a misbehaving child or a stain on a rug. "Sit down, Gavin," she said. It wasn't a request. Gavin sat. He felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. You're the chairman of Obsidian," he whispered. "But how you were nothing. You were a housewife." "I was the architect," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the air. "While you were busy buying Ferraris and giving interviews about your vision, I was building. I took the settlement you threw at me, the crumbs, and I built something real. Obsidian isn't a venture capital firm, Gavin. It's an algorithmic trading empire. And the core code, it's the same code I wrote for you. The code you claimed was yours." She gestured to the glass wall to the world outside. "I own logistics companies in Singapore, data farms in Iceland, and now I am about to own Logos Stream." "But why?" Gavin stammered. "If you're so successful, why buy my company? Why give me $2.5 billion? Sarah smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Because, Gavin, I'm not buying your company to run it. I'm buying it to dismantle it. And I'm certainly not giving you $2.5 billion. She slid a thick folder across the table toward him. "Read the addendum," she said. Gavin's hands shook as he opened the folder. The pages were dense with legalese, but certain phrases jumped out at him. Breach of warranty, fraudulent misrepresentation, intellectual property theft. "What is this?" Gavin asked, his voice trembling. "You signed the indemnification clause," Sarah said, leaning back in her chair. "You agreed that if Logos Stream's code was found to be defective or stolen, you would be personally liable for the damages." She nodded to Simon Cross. Cross tapped his tablet, and the massive screen on the wall flickered to life. It showed a side-by-side comparison of two sets of code. On the left, the core kernel of Logos Stream. On the right, an encrypted time-stamped file dated 3 years ago. The code on the right, Sarah said, is the original source code, digitally signed by me, Sarah Jenkins, 3 years ago. I registered the copyright the day after you asked for a divorce. I didn't file a lawsuit then because I knew you'd bury me in court with your expensive lawyers. I decided to wait. Wait for what? Gavin whispered. For you to become big enough to fail, she replied. I waited for you to leverage everything. I waited for you to be so desperate for an exit that you would sign anything. And you did. Sarah stood up and walked slowly around the table toward him. Here is the situation, Gavin. You are selling Logos Stream to Obsidian for $2.5 billion. But because the product you are selling is based on stolen IP, my IP, you are in breach of contract immediately upon signing. She pointed to a clause on page 40. The penalty for selling stolen IP to Obsidian is set at 100% of the purchase price plus punitive damages, which means the moment you sign the sale, the $2.5 billion comes directly back to me, plus your personal assets to cover the punitive damages. Gavin felt bile rise in his throat. You're bankrupting me. You're stealing my company. I'm repossessing my property, Sarah said coldly. You called me dead weight, Gavin. You told the world I was a clerical worker. You built a reputation on my genius. Now I'm taking the credit back. Gavin stood up, his face red. I won't sign. I'll walk away. I'll go back to New York and fix the code myself. You can't, Sarah said. The dead man's switch triggers in... She checked her Rolex. 4 hours. At 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the encryption keys expire. Logos Stream will crash. Also. Your clients, Amazon, FedEx, DHL, will lose their data. Your stock will go to zero by tomorrow morning. You will be sued by every shareholder investigated by the SEC, and you will likely go to prison for corporate negligence. Gavin slumped back into his chair. He was trapped. There was no way out. If he walked away, he went to prison. If he signed, he walked away penniless. You planned this, Gavin murmured. Every step. The text message, the lowball offer. I engineered it, Sarah corrected. Just like I engineered your success. You were just the user interface, Gavin. I was always the operating system. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the server banks in the distance. So what happens now? Gavin asked, his voice broken. He looked small. The visionary CEO was gone. He was just a man in a suit he could no longer afford. Sarah placed a fountain pen on the document. You sign, she said. You transfer ownership of Logos Stream to Obsidian. In exchange, I will input the encryption key and stabilize the system. The company survives. The employees keep their jobs. And me? Gavin asked. You are terminated effective immediately, Sarah said. You will leave this building with nothing. No golden parachute, no stock options. You keep the condo in Tribeca until the bank forecloses on it, which I assume will be soon, since you leveraged it for your lifestyle. Gavin stared at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc. He had bought himself one just like it when he made his first $1,000,000. This is cruel, he whispered. Sarah, I loved you once. Sarah's expression didn't change. No, Gavin. You loved how I made you look. You loved that I fixed your mistakes, but you never respected me. And in business, respect is the only currency that matters. She leaned in, close, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "You wanted to cut the dead weight, Gavin. Now you're lighter than air. You can fly away." Gavin picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He looked at the signature line. Seller Gavin Reynolds. He looked up at Sarah one last time. He saw no pity in her eyes, only the cold, hard logic of a balanced equation. He signed. As the ink dried, Sarah pulled the folder away. She handed it to Petra. "The deal is closed," Sarah announced. "Escort Mr. Reynolds from the building." 2 guards stepped forward. Gavin stood up. He felt dizzy. He walked toward the door, his legs feeling like lead. Just as he reached the threshold, Sarah spoke again. "Gavin?" He turned around, a flicker of hope in his chest. Maybe she would offer him something. A consulting role, alone. "Don't forget to validate your parking," Sarah said. "It's expensive in Zurich." The guards closed the doors. Gavin stood alone in the hallway. He checked his pockets. He had his phone, his wallet, and a return ticket to New York. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the button for the ground floor. As the numbers descended, he realized the truth. He hadn't just lost a company. He had been erased. He walked out of the building into the cold Swiss air. It started to snow. He looked up at the black monolith of the obsidian building. On the top floor, he saw a light turn on. He imagined Sarah standing there looking down at him. He was the ghost now. 1 year later, the rain in Seattle was relentless. It wasn't the romantic, misty rain that movies liked to portray. It was a cold, grey sheet that soaked into your bones. Gavin Reynolds stood behind the counter of TechFix, a small repair shop in a strip mall in Bellevue, about 10 miles east of his old life. He was wearing a blue polo shirt with a name tag that simply read, Gavin. "It's still not turning on," the customer, a teenager with greasy hair, complained, tapping his phone on the glass counter. "I thought you said you fixed the motherboard." "I did," Gavin said, his voice flat. "But the water damage was extensive. You need a new battery. That's another $80. "Rip off," the kid muttered, but he slapped a credit card down. Gavin ran the card. Declined. "Try again," the kid said. "It's declined," Gavin said, staring at the terminal. He felt a familiar surge of irritation, the old arrogance bubbling up. He wanted to scream. "Do you know who I am? I founded a company worth billions." But he didn't scream. He couldn't, because nobody knew who he was anymore. To the world, Gavin Reynolds was a cautionary tale, a footnote in business school textbooks under the chapter Founder Syndrome. After Zurich, the fall had been swift and brutal. The SEC investigation didn't result in prison time thanks to a plea deal where he admitted to managerial negligence, but it stripped him of his ability to serve as a director of a public company for 10 years. His assets were liquidated to cover the debts he had racked up trying to maintain his image. The Tribeca penthouse gone, the Ferrari repossessed, the friends who used to drink his champagne. They deleted his number before the ink was dry on the foreclosure papers. He handed the phone back to the kid. "Cash only," Gavin said. The kid huffed and walked out. Gavin sighed and leaned against the counter. It was lunch break. He pulled a crumpled sandwich out of a paper bag. He sat on a stool and opened the browser on his work computer, an old desktop that hummed loudly. He didn't want to look, but he couldn't help himself. It was a sickness. Every Tuesday he checked. He typed in the URL obsidian.com/news. The page loaded. And there she was. Sarah. But not just Sarah. She was on the cover of Time magazine's Innovators of the Year issue. The headline read, "The Silent Architect. How Sarah Jenkins Redefined Global Logistics. Gavin clicked the article. He read it hungrily, looking for his name. He needed to see his name. He needed to know that he still mattered to her, even if it was as a villain. He scrolled and scrolled. The article talked about her early years, her brilliance in coding, her quiet struggle against industry biases. It mentioned Logo Stream only as a distressed asset she acquired and successfully rehabilitated. She didn't mention him. Not once. The interviewer asked, "You rebuilt a failing company into a global powerhouse in under a year. What was your motivation?" Was it revenge? Gavin held his breath. Say it, he thought. Say my name. Sarah's response was highlighted in bold. Revenge is inefficient. It requires you to look backward. I was motivated by waste. I saw potential being wasted by poor architecture and ego. I simply removed the inefficiencies and let the code run the way it was meant to. Gavin stared at the screen. Inefficiencies. That's what he was. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a great nemesis. He was just a bug in the system that she had patched out. He felt tears prick his eyes. It wasn't sadness. It was the crushing realization of his own insignificance. He had spent his life trying to be the main character, only to realize he was just a temporary user with revoked admin privileges. The bell above the door chimed. A new customer walked in, a man in a sharp suit, looking at his watch clearly in a rush. "Hey, buddy," the man said, not making eye contact. "I need a rush job on this laptop. I've got a meeting in an hour. Can you handle it?" Gavin looked at the man. He saw the arrogance. He saw the dismissal. He saw himself from 3 years ago. Gavin stood up. He straightened his blue polo shirt. "I can take a look," Gavin said quietly. "But complex problems, those take time." 4,000 miles away, Sarah Jenkins stood on the terrace of her home in the Swiss Alps. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and snow. Inside a dinner party was winding down. Petra was there, laughing with Simon Cross and a few other engineers. They were celebrating the launch of Obsidian's new quantum encryption protocol. Sarah held a glass of vintage Pinot Noir. She looked out at the valley below, where the lights of Zurich twinkled like a circuit board. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. It was a notification from her bank. The quarterly dividends had just cleared. The number was astronomical. She swiped the notification away without really looking at it. The money didn't thrill her anymore. It was just a tool. She thought about Gavin for a split second. It happened less and less these days. The anger that had fueled her for those 2 years in the dark had burned itself out. What was left was a strange sense of peace. She remembered the night he told her she was dead weight. She remembered how heavy she felt that night, like she was drowning. She took a sip of wine and looked up at the stars. She realized now that the weight hadn't been her. It had been him. He was the anchor dragging them both down. And the moment he cut her loose, she didn't sink. She soared. Sarah. She turned. A man was standing in the doorway. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He was a professor of physics she had met in Vienna. He didn't care about her money. He cared about her mind. "Are you coming in?" he asked softly. "We're about to open the dessert." Sarah smiled, a real smile, one that reached her eyes. "I'm coming," she said. She turned her back on the cold, dark valley and walked inside, closing the glass door behind her. The reflection in the glass caught her for just a moment, a woman who was whole, powerful, and finally completely free. And that is the story of how Gavin Reynolds learned the most expensive lesson of his life: never underestimate the person who holds your foundation together. He thought he was the visionary, but he was just the decoration. Sarah was the structure. It's a brutal reminder that in life and business, arrogance is a blindfold. When you treat people like they are disposable, you might just be throwing away the only thing keeping you afloat. Gavin wanted to fly, but he forgot that you can't fly if you destroy the ground you're standing on. What do you think? Did Gavin deserve to lose everything? Or was Sarah's revenge too cold? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma, betrayal, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow so I can bring you more stories like this. And if you haven't already hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a drama. Remember, be careful who you call dead weight. They might just be the ones learning how to fly without you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.